Welcome to the Revenue Rewired podcast, hosted by StringCan Interactive's visionary CEO, Jay Feitlinger, and no-nonsense COO, Sarah Shepard. We're here to accelerate your revenue and give your marketing purpose. All right. Hello, and welcome everybody to this next episode of the Revenue Rewired podcast. Hi, Jay.
Hey Sarah, how are you?
Good. How are you? Where are you?
Good. We actually flip-flop. I feel like every few weeks you're somewhere in Europe, but now it's my turn. I am in northern Spain, visiting my older daughter who's studying abroad here, and now we're currently in San Sebastian, and then tomorrow we're heading to the wine region. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Oh, that sounds awesome. It's supposed to be like 90 degrees here today in
Oh,
November.
wow.
I know. I know. You've got to
It's
be
cold,
kind of
cold
glad
here.
you're. Yeah, yeah.
I
I
love
had a
it
feeling you might be happy about that.
very much.
Well, so Jay is actually doing a little bit of an experiment, which ties into our topic today. And this one is an interesting one for us. And, we believe that, well, I'll just tell you guys the topic: test it or lose it, why companies that don't experiment fall behind. And I think that this topic probably has a lot more oomph now than it probably has before. Internally, we've had a lot of conversations about technology in general and how I think the veil has been lifted in a positive way for marketers, in that people are a little more comfortable seeing behind the scenes and seeing some of the how the sausage is made, as you like to say. And this is one area that I think a lot of us take for granted when it's done well. And, Jay, I'd be curious, in your time at StringCan, for example, how has this evolved? Like getting the testing of tactics, for example, and experimentation, how have you been able to kind of get clients to understand, and where has that sort of originated from?
Well, I think from my experience working in the agency world, which is kind of interesting, I found that a lot of times marketers, which is surprising, are often the most risk adverse. And I think mainly it's because of how we've been trained as marketers to rely on data. And the situation comes up is you have a new idea without having the confidence with data to justify it's going to work or not. It's a little scary putting yourself out there to make a recommendation. And even when we launched StringCan, I was pushing clients hard to set aside, 10, 15% of their annual budget for us to be trying out new things, everything from messaging, channels, ad creative, whatever it might be. And obviously, the companies that have that built into their culture, that are very comfortable with that, love the idea of it. So I'm not saying we should, set this money on fire and burn it and see what happens. But you are pretty strategic, so you can uncover new opportunities. But I think to your question, I love it because as I'm reflecting a little bit here, I think one of the unique things about us that I really like is we treat ourselves like a client, and we often will try out new things on ourselves first. And so what I have found is when I talk to companies, at first they're like, not that they would say it this way, but it's almost like, of course you have no problem in spending, six figures on trying out this new thing because it's not really your money. And I think that over the years, our clients have trusted us because we say to them, look, here's what we've tried for ourselves, and it worked extremely well or it didn't, and what we learned from it. And then here's what we tried this with other clients that are similar industry as yours. And I think that gives people that are a little uncomfortable with testing a little bit more of that hope that this would be, I think, worth doing. So I think that's just part of, I mean, obviously, you know me, Sarah. Uh, I have been one that's not uncomfortable with taking chances. Hopefully not a demise to, our company and team. But I
No,
think
we
that
balance
is,
each other out in that.
and I appreciate that about you. You do a really good job of keeping me grounded. But I just feel like, you have to try things. And I think over the years, when I reflect on the things that have done so well for us and our clients, I would say more often than not, it came out of some kind of testing, environment. You just don't know what you don't know until you try it. And so I just think over the years, there's so many cool things we learn. And even as you know, when we try out something and doesn't work out, we still learn from it. That's why I've always been a glass half full kind of guy. And I just feel like there has to be some level of focus around, trying out new experiments.
Hmm. And I think from my perspective, my head is swimming with experiments are not shots in the dark. They are a thoughtful hypothesis. There's always like
Hmm.
intention behind the experiment. And actually, quick question before we continue on too far. Is an experiment the same as a test? And we use the term A/B test in marketing. Are they the same thing or are they different? And if so, how?
Um, wow. I guess for me, when I think about test, it's more about a theme, a general strategy or idea. And then the experiment is the actual strategy, how you're going to implementing it, like A/B testing. So that's why it's interesting. Obviously we can argue this till we're blue in the face around the semantics around it. But that's just how my brain works. Is like the test is the concept of what you're trying to prove if it's going to work or not, and the experiments are what you're going to put in place in a strategic way to figure out if that idea you had actually is accurate or not.
Hmm. And we've heard stories too. So, like back to my comment about it, it's not this shot in the dark, and it's also not something gigantic. I think when you hear testing or experiment, it sounds like it has to be a complete 180 from whatever you're doing. It needs to be this basically whole new tactic or whole new strategy and approach, and everything needs to change. And what's shocking is some of the smaller A/B tests are the ones that give us some really interesting information. I can think of one where just the language on a CTA on a button changed everything. And it was really interesting how it kind of created more emphasis or urgency than the original button, but it wasn't obvious. And I think starting with some small tests can kind of help your team dip their toe in the water if they're not used to it. Because to your point about marketers being risk adverse, it can feel really scary. And, getting to that client who did the CTA test, for example, how do we get clients to appreciate what it is that we're learning from it? And is it a one and done kind of thing, or is it something that's ongoing?
Well, I think, do you remember? Well, I guess to answer your question, taking a step back, and I'll answer that. But you remember the Google's that optimized whatever was service they had in place?
Mm-hmm.
Because,
Yeah.
when that came out, and I was so bummed when they stopped focusing on it. But the thing that I learned to answer your question is, again, it often depends, but the budget and the level of competition of what you're testing is really what will help you determine what the winning formula is. And what I loved about Google Optimize, and Sarah, you nailed it. It's like when I was growing up in the world of marketing, we would like think about simple things like a landing page wireframe. And our team would just be overzealous and we would create, 3 to 5 different versions of a landing page. And what we found is we would have too many variables in place and we never know what the thing was that made it win or not. But as a detriment to that was also then the budget. Because what I have found is that you have to have enough, traffic and data to be able to say if this was a win or not. And so I think, from my perspective, you always should be testing. And maybe each month or each campaign, frequency time frame, you're thinking about what is the one variable you want to test if it's going to work or not. To your point, if you remember, like we had a client where there was a big debate if rounded or square edges of a call to action button would make a difference. And we're like,
Mm-hmm.
let's go ahead. Let's just go ahead and say for the month of November, we're going to make that the test. And we just did an equal A/B testing with the same budget in place. And what came out of it was really interesting perspective. But then again, you might try it in 3 months, it might have different results. And maybe now there's a seasonality in place. And so I think to answer your question, I think you have to be really strategic about what you're testing. You're not testing too many variables at the same time. Ideally, it's like one major variable. And then you're giving enough time to have the confidence that the data is telling you which direction to head next But I think if you just start and stop and start and stop, potentially it could be the market, it could be seasonality, it could be level of competitors that are significantly increasing or decreasing their budget, and it gives you like this false promise or this false hope. So I just think you need to have kind of a mindset in place of, again, every month you're looking at the percentage of your campaign is set aside for testing, and you're learning from that to help improve all the other campaign elements.
Yeah, and I think we've said this before, but it's a reminder that you have to let things sit for a minute. And I think 90 days is sort of like the lowest level of letting anything run to allow for enough data and traffic and, basically analysis of whatever it is you're testing or running, because otherwise you could run into just a flash in the pan, some
Yep.
sort of anomaly could happen. There's seasonality, like there's so much going on in the world right now. It seems more unstable in a lot of ways than it ever has been. And so making long-term decisions off of super short-term tests or campaigns can be very dangerous because you're
Hmm.
missing out on getting a better average of the whole picture. And I know that is so hard. Like it's probably one of the most interesting conversations we have with prospects and clients is why do I have to wait so long for my results?
Yep. And I get it. I mean, it is so frustrating, but also, as I'm thinking about it, we are constantly trying to reverse engineer the algorithms of the platforms. I mean, again, me and you have had so many conversations about like LinkedIn alone. Whereas, one month the kind of content we produce is doing great, and then the next month it's not. So we try something new. I just thinking you have to have this mindset of like just never giving up, and there's always ways to kind of build a better mousetrap. But I think 90 days is a really, really good kind of time frame. But depending upon goals, again, the budget is what's going to dictate that. Because
Mm.
again, if you're doing like a Google Ads campaign test, for example, and the budget's too small that you're setting aside for testing, it could take 6 to 9 months to know what's working or not. And so ideally, if there is a date we're trying to aim for and working backwards off of that, you have to apply a healthy enough amount of resources and or budget to it to be able to get the data you need within those 90 days.
Yeah, and thinking about, all right, so I get it. I gotta have like some time, some patience, some money. I have to have at least a small, not too aggressive of a test, like too different. But where do I start testing? Like, how do I know what even needs my attention in this space? Or is it just something that is sort of expected in certain tactics, like Google Ads, for example?
Well, like obviously this could turn to a whole nother podcast show. I started thinking about like the whole revenue flow audit concept. And that's
Hmm.
kind of where my brain immediately went to when you started talking that through, because again, the variables in play here might not even be at the top of the funnel stuff. There might be other things going on. Maybe you have a new salesperson in place who hasn't maybe properly been trained or goes off on their own path. And I guess so my mindset would be is like working backwards off the goals they are trying to accomplish. So let's say, for example, your company wants to bring on 25 new clients in the next, 120 days, and then you kind of work backwards off of how many meetings and proposals and contracts and all the things you need, and then that'll give you an idea of like, okay, well, what needs to happen now for us to get there in a more confident way, and that's where I think the testing comes into play. Um, but I think again, there's just so many variables at play here regarding what you're trying to accomplish. It does make it a really hard thing to come up with. Obviously, for us, we have a luxury here that we have so many creative-minded people on our team that we can literally sit, in a room together and do some kind of blue sky thinking, and obviously leveraging the power of AI. That's where I feel like it's been a huge benefit for us to make almost like put an Iron Man suit on us, where like inside this suit is still all of our smarts to kind of leading the prompts. But I think it often can help you think about other ideas, and then you start mapping out. Okay, we came up with 10 new test concepts. Now, how are we going to logically do this with the budget and resources available? And that's where I think the mapping gets super exciting. But the hard part is again is like it's so easy to be like after a week or two, be like, oh, let's try something different. And I think you gotta be a little bit patient. So that's not my strong suit, um, skill set, I guess. But I think you need to have that kind of logic in place, or else you're never gonna know what's gonna help you or not.
Yeah, and you know what else is interesting is, and I was explaining this to a peer the other day, what's old is new again. And it's not just in clothes or styles or cars or lingo that the kids are doing now. It's also in marketing tactics, like things
Six,
that didn't
seven.
seem to work. Yeah, I knew you were gonna. I wanted to say, but I didn't.
Sorry.
Every parent who just heard you was like, "Ugh."
Eye
um,
rolls.
yes, but you know, it's like you can't actually throw out past tests that were quote unsuccessful in your mind
Hmm.
because of all of those factors that we mentioned that those variables are at play. I think it's kind of shocking too how we are sort of trying to also follow AI. For example, you know, that's one piece that's really throwing a monkey wrench into a lot of things. And as fast as that's changing, you know, we talked about this, I think, in one of our last podcasts was how much data ChatGPT was pulling from Reddit. And then they really scaled that back. And if you actually are on Reddit, you were like, why are they even doing this? Like, why are they pulling from this place? It's a lot of a dumpster fire of conversation. Very valuable things are hidden within it. But to that point, then how many people invested all of that into Reddit, and now that test may or may not prove useful anymore because of all of the other factors. And so I think noting the time frame of your tests, like being a bit of a scientist. And we used to have that on our employee manuals and all kinds of language inside the organization was we were like marketing scientists. And part of that is being okay with experimentation and risk and failure because it can teach you a lot, but it's also just a snapshot in time.
No, I love it. You alluded to this, but I do want to say it again because this is the thing that made me think about it where we've had that chat with clients so many times. You know, the unfortunate thing about marketing is like the PTSD type of stuff. Whereas, and obviously you've heard this, Sarah, we've had so many chats with clients over the years where they're like, well, we tried X with our last agency and it didn't work well, so we don't want to do it again. And I think again here, luckily for us, we've never been a yes type of person, an order taker. We're really good about kind of like giving ideas and new thoughts. And what has been super exciting for me is that when we have conversations with our clients about, hey, I know that you're concerned about this, platform or messaging or channel, whatever it might be, but here's a different way of how we think it could work well for you. And this is why we also think timing is really good to at least test this out and build some experiments around it. And I would say more often than not, our clients have trusted us to let us, do some of that. And it has been really exciting, especially when it works out well. But I think to your point, we have had some bad experiments over the years. And I think the way we show the data back to our clients to explain to them what we learned from it, I would say some of our clients that have been more adverse to trying out stuff are now ones I'm noticing over the years are so much more comfortable with it because they can see how we're thinking about it. So that's where I think it gets super exciting is just is not allowing the past to dictate the kind of the future because there always are things that of better ways that you can do stuff and not just give up.
Yeah, and I think it also helps clients reduce a little bit of their FOMO. You know, when they're being pressured by leadership or other stakeholders, like, why are we not on this channel? Like, I remember there was a client, they're in a very laggardish type of industry, and they were like, we should get on TikTok or Snapchat.
Yep.
And we were like, but no one who would want to know you is on that platform. Now that actually may be not as true today.
Yep.
And there's obviously research that would need to go into that in great detail to make sure that was useful. But, you know, that's sort of a more extreme example of a test that definitely was not useful back then. And it was kind of a shiny object. But now, very well, like Reddit and Quora would be a joke. You know, a marketer would have laughed at that opportunity a couple years ago. Like there's nothing that's coming out of that. And so I think we have to really keep an open mind and recognize that without experimentation and testing, the gap between what you know is just going to widen. It's not helping you fulfill some of those like Swiss cheese holes in your strategy or your tactics by saying this there's more pieces of data, I guess, to analyze and to put together into the big puzzle because it's just getting bigger and bigger with more AI, browsers, and it's just going to become a really big, wide, really a worldwide web of crazy. And so you have to, I think, start finding a little bit of an appetite for testing and start small. You don't have to start big, just a bite-sized chunk is really all you need to kind of get into the process of it. And obviously, there's a good before and after process too of how are you reviewing your results, and not, and maybe I'm wrong in this. You could tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's really an apples to apples. You can't do that. I think that's unfair to the test because it's probably not getting the full budget. It's not getting the
Hmm.
full time frame that, your other campaigns or landing pages have had. It hasn't had Google's attention, for years or however long you've been running some of that stuff. So I think take it with, you know, my hypothesis is, my intention is, I'm I'm wondering if and be a little bit more open to how those results can kind of guide you in one way or the other.
Yeah, and I think to your point, it's like one of the reasons why I got so into AI, I don't know, probably let's say 2+ years ago now, it feels like,
We've
is
had a
one of the first
policy for
things.
3 years. Isn't that crazy?
Wow, that's insane. But I think one of the first things that I did was I basically created a custom GBT that helped me kind of think through some of this stuff because, as you know, Sarah, I'm never short of new ideas and shiny objects.
Nope.
And I hate overwhelming the team with my 12 million ideas every single week. And so I have found that I leverage AI to either come up with some new concepts and or run it through like a filter. I think to your point, I love that comment about, um, you're starting out small. Again, like I think about like the AI stuff, and so many people are very reluctant to it and intimidated by it. I think if you just go on there and just start, asking it some questions and seeing what you learn from it, I think it'll give you much a higher level of comfort around some of this. But again, if you don't do this, I'm not saying that you're doing a set and forget it model, but you're never going to learn about what missed opportunities are in play without setting some kind of testing strategy in place.
And I wouldn't be afraid of it, quote, ruining anything that's currently going on. It can only really add a layer of knowledge and information.
Yeah.
It's
I
like
think to
going
your
to
point
a
on
new
that.
restaurant. You might find a new dish you like. Maybe it's not your new favorite restaurant, but you tested.
I love that. I got my family to be eating anchovies when we're out here, so that was fun,
Ooh.
which I loved. But I think to your point, a really good recommendation would be is, when you think about like the analytics side, um, is making sure that you are setting up the campaigns wherever you're doing on the testing side, where you have, your ongoing efforts that have a lot of data and strategy around it that you can almost have predictable success and rely on. And then you have like your experiment testing campaigns. And I think when you analyze, how the past month went, you're reflecting and what you want to adjust for the next month, you should look at those things separately, but then also together. And that's where I think gets super interesting is that I think if you just, lump it all into one thing, you'll never know, again, what that variable was that you should be doing more of or less of. And so that's why I love when we do like a reporting side, where like here's the reporting data from our, status quo ongoing, strategic campaigns, and here's the ones for the new test. But again, after, the first month or two, you have to still wait more time because every month you're learning from it. I think it's just really exciting to think about it from the data point of view and then leveraging it to make more enhancements for the next quarter.
Yeah. Well, our takeaway is really use testing and A/B testing, experimentation to help kind of fill the gaps, like the Swiss cheese or the blind spots in your company to help momentum move forward because the less you do now, the bigger that gap is going to get. And so trying to keep up with it can be as simple as running a couple of tests, switch out a CTA, change timing. You don't even have to change an asset. There's literally a million gajillion ways of doing that. And, oops, we would be happy to help you pick out a couple. You could reach us at podcast@stringcaninteractive.com. But, we've done a lot and we've also had a lot of failure ones too. So we could help
Hmm.
you understand that too. All right,
Thank you. I
Jay. Well,
appreciate
this
it.
was a great one. And we hope you all had a lovely listen and a great day. Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Revenue Rewired podcast. Send us your questions to podcast@stringcaninteractive.com and follow us for more insights to drive your business forward.